Fine, and my voice is completely in the pits. I got this whatever kind of a cold, man cold, they say,
Yeah.
the other day, and it's the kind of thing my wife says that, oh, uh, do you need some, like comforting words or whatever? And she, I feel sorry for you. I say, oh yeah, absolutely. So that's the deal. But I hope I hope I can keep it up for a while at least. And actually, the main idea is that you'll do the most of the talking. So in case your
Mhm.
hotel connection will keep up, we'll see how that works.
Yeah.
I
All
guess
right. Sounds good.
yeah, if needed, I guess you can give the audio, most of the bandwidth if needed. So far, it's just great, no problems at all.
Okay. Perfect.
Um, okay, great. Let's get this thing started. So I think I guess I'll try some kind of introduction here. Hello
So
everyone.
I
Be
haven't prepared
smart. Yeah.
anything. I'm just going to fly with whatever you say.
What's that, Chris? Say again.
I haven't prepared anything, so I'll just fly with whatever you come up with.
Yeah, I haven't prepared anything either. So we are good. That's the way I always play. I'm a teacher for heaven's sake, teaching full time. When could I do the
Exactly.
preparing stuff? Uh,
Mhm.
well, I'm just kidding. I've done my homework, hours and hours, of course, always do, always do. Anyway, where were we?
Okay.
This is Be Smart on Air. Once again, actually, Be Smart on Air interview. How I'm going to cope with that, I'm not quite sure, since my voice just might be gone. Perhaps I can just show, like pieces of paper and write on those. That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
I've been doing that. Anyway, March 15, I believe, and it is like 10:15 a.m. in my home turf. But in Australia, those guys are living in the future. I've got with me Chris Betcher from down under, basically. And I was about to say from Sydney, but it seems you are traveling, Chris, right?
I am. I'm not in Sydney at the moment. I'm actually in a town called Mildura, which is I
Where
was
on
going to say a
earth?
small country town, but it's actually not that small. It's about 30,000 people.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Outback Victoria.
So how far is it from Sydney? Is it like 10-hour jet flight or something?
No, it's about 1,000 kilometres. So
Okay.
it's
Jeez. If I all of a sudden mute my microphone here, that's because I just got a cough.
no problem.
Um, it's really cool that you could join me today, especially since I think, kind of messed up your evening here a little bit, and you had
No,
basically.
no, we had plans, and the trouble with my phone is most of my announcements, most of my reminders come up 10 minutes before, and I was about 11 minutes away.
Pretty amazing. And actually, so far at least, you said you're on hotel wireless network. The audio is great to me at least. Is my audio okay?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, perfect.
With the exception of my voice, that's really not what it should be. I think.
Sounds
Um,
fine.
the uh, the reason that I know about you actually is mainly this podcast thing. You're heavily involved in podcasts, right?
I've done a little bit of podcasting. Yes, I started back in 2006 when podcasting was just taking off,
Right.
and done the podcast back then called the Virtual Staff Room. And the idea of it was that you go into most schools and teachers sit around in the staff areas and they talk to each other about all sorts of things. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if you could take those conversations and make them somehow public?
Hmm.
And so I started this little project called the Virtual Staff Room, and I just basically invited all of my teacher friends to get together every couple of weeks and hang out with me. It wasn't a hangout back then; we were just using Skype,
Sure.
uh, and just sit and chat about whatever. And it actually, I think, in the end, we did, I don't know, 40 or 50 episodes over a period of a couple of years. So it was just a bit of a hobby, but it was a great introduction to podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'd love to get a bit more into podcasting later on here, and especially Google Educast, which is, I believe, pretty well known in quite a few countries. And actually, you might be pretty well known, and definitely your voice in quite a few countries, I believe. It's kind of funny.
Because it seems like such an odd thing to say, but strangely enough, it is occasionally true.
Yeah, right. It's kind of fascinating. Like when we're meeting here right now, I don't even want to say, this thing people say in real life. I don't like that. I mean, if this
No,
is not
it's all
real
real
life, yeah, it's definitely real life, isn't it? But like this virtual meeting of ours, it's funny because I've been listening to you quite a bit. And not watching that much, a little bit, but of course, I mean, it's so much easier to just listen to audio and watching
Oh, look,
visually. So
I'm a big fan of the audio podcasts, and the Google Educast is both video and audio, but
yeah, right,
honestly, most of the listens come from audio.
yeah. But
And
actually,
I would
this,
guess it's probably true for the majority of podcasts, is that
mhm,
even the ones that do video as well,
mhm,
the whole point of a podcast to me was that I can learn while I'm doing other things. So I can be walking the dog or driving the car
right,
or something else when my hands are not available, or my mind is wandering or whatever, and listen rather than sit and watch. I just don't have the attention to give something like that all the time.
yeah, and it takes lots of time and concentration if you are watching video and really want to like get it. Uh,
Absolutely.
Different story completely. Uh, you've been working in education for quite a few years, it seems. What's that, like 20 some?
Yeah, I think I worked it out recently, and it's getting pretty close to
All
30.
right.
Yeah.
How did you get into education? Was that something that was, okay, take this, get into this time machine thing a little bit? Was it something you were planning at an early age or something that just happened?
No, not at all. My mother was a teacher,
Okay.
and so I grew up in a household of having a teacher in the house.
Hmm.
And so I knew what went on behind the scenes for teachers. I knew how hard they worked and how many hours they put in. And I never really saw myself as being a teacher, but I got to the end of school and I didn't quite know what to do with myself. So I wanted to go to art school, but I kind of thought that the chance of me actually making a living as an artist was fairly slim. So I thought I'll go and do an art teaching course, and that way I can always just not teach, but at least I've got it. And as it turns out, I kind of thought teaching wasn't a bad gig.
I guess it's not. Depending
But
on
that
quite a
said,
few things.
what was that, mate?
I just said that I think you're right. Teaching is not a bad gig, but it depends a bit, of course. Like the money you make and all that that is essential too, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely never been into teaching for the money, although I don't think the money in teaching is that bad. I know in some parts of the world it's terrible.
Yeah.
There are
Well,
places in
welcome to the North Pole. I'm telling you.
really, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Look,
it's
there are
in
places in the
Sweden.
world. I have conversations with some friends from the US sometimes, and when I hear some of the paltry amounts that teachers get paid in the US, it's disgraceful. I was just reading an article earlier that said that the top 25 richest share traders on Wall Street make more than the top 400,000 teachers in the US. And I
Uh,
just think there's something really wrong with our society when we value 25 share traders as worth more than 400,000 teachers.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, of course,
it's
I mean,
unreal.
that's kind of madness. And getting back to what you just said, um, I guess hopefully not that many teachers get into teaching for the money. Definitely not in Sweden, since the money is really, really bad. Wages are rock bottom, considering what the some kind of average might be, for example, in Europe.
Mm.
But there are quite a few other quite a few other positive things in this gig. Definitely, that's a fact. For example, this thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've never really understood why we devalue our teachers so much financially.
me
Um,
neither.
because I really can't think of too many professions that do a more important job than what teachers do. And every other profession that we hold up as being, your doctors and your lawyers and your accountants or whatever else people hold up as being kind of the pinnacle of a career choice.
Hmm.
None of those people would be where they were if it wasn't for teachers.
Sure. And yeah, it's kind of hard. At least it feels kind of hard to me comparing different professions and which is the most important and all
Mm.
that. But there should be some kind of it should be like a little bit more of a fair deal at least. If you say study for 5 years,
Yeah.
um, there should be you should make a decent living at least. You know.
Yeah,
So
totally agree.
that's what I feel. But what the heck?
Yeah.
Life is good at the North Pole in very many respects, I must say that. Even though the wages perhaps are not, like the best in the world. Um, you mentioned earlier that you kind of had this, well, if not choice, at least dreams of getting into art. What's the music? Did I get that right?
No, visual arts.
Visual arts. Okay.
When I was a kid, pardon me, I loved to draw, paint, and make pictures. And so I just figured I'd like to do something like that. And it was interesting because I went to art school for 4 years, loved it, had a fantastic experience, just thought it was the best deal ever.
Yeah.
But in the course of going to art school, that's where I really discovered playing music. It's where I discovered computer programming.
Mhm.
It's where I discovered a whole bunch of things. And I think what happened is when I left art school and tried to get a job, and there were very few art teaching jobs around at the time, so I actually took a job as a mathematics teacher. That lasted about 2 days, and then a job as an art teacher came up somewhere, so I immediately left and took that job. And surprisingly, I hated it. It was awful. And it's funny, I went into teaching and I did it for a couple of years and I thought to myself, this is not what I want to do with my life.
Mhm.
And
What things were the most those things
I
that
loved the kids. I thought the kids were fantastic.
sure.
I hated all the administrivia, all the nonsense that goes around, paperwork and administration
Well,
and just
I still hate that
yeah, me too,
after
totally.
20 years.
Yeah, it doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
So I hated that. Totally loved the kids. Just being around kids all day and just
Yeah.
doing cool stuff. And it just became apparent in that particular situation anyway that loving being with kids and wanting to do the right thing by them that's not how your success was being measured. And so the first opportunity I got to do something else, I actually left and did something else. I actually got a job in a company that was selling four-wheel drive accessories.
All right.
So we were selling ball bars and the suspension kits and all that sort of stuff. So, which was kind of a hobby of mine at the time anyway. So I did that for, I don't know, 8 months or something. And then turns out I'm not a very good salesperson. So I think on the day I went in to resign because I disliked the job so much, they actually wanted to basically terminate my employment anyway. So it was a happy ending. But I was left thinking, okay, well I've tried teaching and that didn't work out, and I've tried sales and that didn't work out. So I don't know what I can do. So I ended up getting a job driving a taxi, believe it or not.
All right. Okay.
And I drove taxis for about, my plan was to drive taxis for about a month while I found something else. And I ended up driving taxis for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And ended up getting involved in the whole taxi industry and sort of the behind the scenes stuff of how the taxi bases are managed and all that. And I got to say, I loved it. If I hated teaching the first time around, I loved being a taxi driver. It was just the best thing. And you know what I discovered I liked about it was the freedom to be your own boss, the constantly having to think about strategy in order to make money.
Yeah.
Because you're really driving a taxi is not, you don't just get in the car and drive around in circles and hope you make money. There's a strategy.
Sure.
And if you understand the strategy and the way that cities flow back and forth between morning and afternoon, and you understand where people want to be at certain times and you position yourself right, you can actually do pretty well as a taxi driver. Most people I saw driving taxis didn't understand any of that, and they constantly complained that they made no money. But I actually made reasonable money and enjoyed it. So so I did that for a while.
Was that in
But
Sydney?
Eventually got to the point. Yeah, that was in Sydney. Yeah,
Sydney.
yeah, and it was in the late 1980s, and in 1988 Sydney had a bicentennial year. So Australia was 200 years old, and so there were a lot of celebrations going on. And so in the lead up to that, and even after that, then leading into other things, Sydney was a really exciting place to be, and driving a taxi was an incredibly busy and rewarding thing to be doing at the time. And I discovered I really love people. I just love sitting and talking to people and hearing people's stories and and just chatting.
Yeah.
Was,
right. So how on earth did you find your way back to education?
Well, in 1990 I got married for the first time, and I say the first time because it's happened again since.
Oh, okay.
But I got married, and my wife at the time, or my fiance, said, "Look, this 3 o'clock in the morning business that you're doing with the taxis, this is not going to work. You need to find something else to do." And so she said, "Why don't you go back to teaching?" She was a teacher. And so I gave it a try, and I went back. And the second time I went back to teaching, I actually really enjoyed it. It was great. And I discovered I loved it.
What had changed, Chris?
I think there were two things that changed. One was I matured and I got older. I just think when I went into teaching as a 20-something-year-old, I was just too young and immature to understand what I was really doing.
Okay.
I didn't feel much older than the kids I was teaching. But when I went back the second time, I was older, I was more mature. I think the whole experience of driving a cab and learning just to deal with people on a take people as they are, and kids are people.
They really are.
Yeah, when you drive a cab and you get, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, 60 people a day going through your taxi that you have to learn to deal with, and some of them you like and some of them you don't like, and some of them, you can't wait to get out of the car, and some of them you love talking to. But you realise they're just people, and, if you do that long enough, you start to develop hopefully some skills with people. And I think when I went back into school, all of those people skills came back in understanding students as people and not just as students.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the factors.
Yeah. I guess that's awfully essential. Yeah.
And then the other factor was I had a principal that I worked with who I really respected. And I was reading something about leadership the other day, and they're talking about the 5 levels of leadership. That when someone is a leader, it can be one of 5 reasons. It can be either because you follow them because you have to, or you follow them because you want to, or you follow them because they've done something that you respect for the organisation, or they've done something that you respect for you. But the best form of leadership is where you respect them simply because of who they are. And this guy who was my principal, I just had enormous respect for this guy simply because of who he was. And he was transparent, he was genuine, he was a nice guy, he was honest, he was forthright, all the qualities that I would have admired in someone this guy had. And he really made me question. I remember the first staff meeting we had with this new principal. And he came in, and he was an older guy, with beard, and he looked like Santa Claus. And he came into the staff meeting, and he started off with saying, "Before we get started, I want you to tell me what's the last piece of educational, what's the last educational journal you've read? What's an interesting educational article that you've recently exposed yourself to?"
Okay.
And the whole room went quiet and just went. It was crickets, and he said, "You do read these things, right?" And everyone was quiet. And then he gave us this big lecture, and he said, how can you expect to be taken seriously as a professional if you don't continually grow as a professional? You know, your doctor doesn't stop learning when they leave medical school, and it sounds like you guys, since you left being like teachers' college, you haven't actually kept learning, and that's unacceptable. Mm-hmm. So he went on a bit of a mission to try and make sure that we understood the value of continual lifelong growth professionally.
How did it work out?
Good, yeah, good. I remember the first thing he did, he came in the next day with a whole bunch of books on school discipline, because that was one of the issues we were facing at this school, was just discipline. It was a pretty hard school, it was a pretty low socioeconomic area with you know, a lot of discipline problems at times. So he came in with this book about discipline and, you know, ways of managing that. And he bought a copy for everybody on the staff, and he said, I want you all to read this, because until we've got a common language to talk about stuff, this is all guessing, right? So let's all read this book, and even if you don't agree with it, now we've got some language we can use to have discussions going forward. And that was a starting point. And I just thought that was a brilliant piece of leadership. So yeah, teaching made a lot more sense the second time round. But then I think the real difference, though, is I was teaching art in this school the second time. But when I got that job, they asked me if I would also be interested in teach computing.
Okay, I was just about to ask about that.
Yeah, well, I'd done a little bit of computing at art school because I met a guy at art school who taught himself to program. And he showed me some stuff, and I went, that's fascinating. How do I learn to do that? And so he taught me to program. And then I went and did a couple of courses, and this is back in the Apple II days, you know, this is Apple Basic and all the stuff. But I was fascinated by what you could get a computer to do. And in fact, I actually went to the dean of the art school, and because it was an art education college, and I said, you know, why don't we offer any computer courses here? And like, this is 1982. So, you know, computers were just starting to appear on the scene. You know, it was before the Macintosh, it was before all of that stuff. And I said to this guy, why aren't we teaching computing here? And he went, I don't know, do you think we should be? And I said, yeah, totally, I think we should be. So he said, well, put together a course and we'll see if we can run something. So I ended up designing or finding a course in computer graphics that was run at a nearby university, and convincing the art school to let us go and do that course in computer graphics and get credit for it as part of our art degree.
Cool. Nice.
And so I'd always liked computers, and then when I got this job in this school after I went back to teaching, they said, would you be interested in teaching computing? And I said, yeah, it's great. I was really interested in computing when I was at school, college. And so I did that, and turns out I actually liked teaching computing more than I liked teaching art. And I realised that when I thought I was in love with art, I was actually in love with ideas.
All right.
And I still like art, and I still like computing, but I love ideas.
Yeah.
And however you want to express an idea, whether it's through paint or whether it's through bits, it doesn't really matter. You know, if it's a brilliant, clever idea, I'm fascinated by it. I think these days there are just lots of brilliant, creative ideas that are being expressed in bits.
And talking about computing and how you got started really early, as it sounds. So then the internet happened, huh?
Yes, it did. The internet did happen.
And what did that mean to you?
You know, I moved schools around that time. So I was teaching art in this school for a while, and I saw a job advertised for a head of ICT, so like a leader of ICT in a school that happened to be the school that I went to as a student. And you know what these old boys networks are like, you know, you say, oh, I was a student here, and they, oh, would you like the job? It was a little bit like that. I was horribly underqualified for this job. I didn't have any qualifications in ICT, but I knew a guy, you know.
All right. So it's a good thing if you know a guy.
Yeah, so I went for this interview, and I you know, the principal said, well, you know, I like you, and you're an old boy of the school, and so, you know, you can have the job. So I was a little surprised, but I was excited. And in a period of 9 years, I took that school from basically having no technology at all to to having one of the best networks of all the schools in the Sydney region. We were doing amazing things with technology. We got audited several times, and massive recommendations for all the stuff we were doing. So I was really proud of what I managed to do in that school in terms of putting technology in, like hardware, software, network, but also what we were getting kids to actually do with computing. And I still look back at that period of time, which was sort of 1990, 92, 93 onwards, and look back at that time now, and I think there's things we were doing back then that I'm only just starting to see some schools doing now.
Yeah, I understand.
So I was really proud of what we achieved in that school.
Was that PLC Sydney, or was it later when you?
No, that was later. No, that was a school called Marist College, College, Penshurst.
Okay. Well, you've been quite a few years at PLC, right?
I was there for 8 years.
Sorry.
I was there for 8 years. I really think my foundational, where I learnt to teach, was Penshurst at Marist. Yeah. And there were lots of reasons for that. But it's interesting you say about the internet. I remember it must have been mid-90s, early 90s, probably 92, 93. And I read an article in a magazine that said, it was talking about this new thing called the internet. And I went, oh, this sounds fascinating. We have to get one of these internet things.
Yeah, that's great.
So I went down to the principal and I said, what are we going to do to get the internet? I want the internet in my classroom. And he went, what is it? And I went, it sounds fantastic. I want it in my classroom. He said, well, find out what you need. And back in the day, we're talking dial-up internet on a 56K modem. It's probably slower than that. And I said, well, apparently you need a telephone line. And he said, we're not putting a telephone line in your classroom. I said, I need the internet. I need this thing, the internet. I need a telephone line in my classroom. And he went, well, I'm not paying for a telephone line to your classroom. So I went and spoke to the telephone service company and said, how much is it going to cost to do this? And it turns out most of the cost is digging the trench. So you've actually got to dig a hole that runs from the street all the way into the school so they can run the cable in to put the telephone line in.
Sure.
So I went back to the principal and I said, look, if I come in on the weekend and dig the trench, will you let me have the internet? And he eventually reluctantly agreed.
This is just amazing stuff. Amazing stuff.
So I came in on the weekend and literally with a shovel and a pick, and I dug a trench that went from the front of the school all the way to my classroom, so that on Monday the telephone company could come in and run a cable, and I had telephone in my classroom.
And you had the internet in your classroom.
I had the internet. The principal came up and he said, so where's the telephone? I said, no, I don't want a telephone. I want a telephone line.
Oh, boy.
So this is like before our network and before anything else. It was just I had a telephone line in my classroom. For
that is cool.
Internet.
That is cool. For sure. So for quite a few years, you've been like working as a what would be the good expression for that, tech integrator or something like that?
Well, at that school, my title was ICT coordinator.
All right.
No one had really come up with a good name for that job.
Yeah.
But I did get to a point in that job where I felt like I'd done everything I could do there, and so I thought, for my own personal growth, I need to move on. So I moved on to another school. And I was there for 5 years. But one of those years, I actually went to Canada and lived in Canada for a year. I did a teacher exchange program.
Interesting. How was that?
It was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And so that was 2006, and I was living in Ontario, in Toronto. I think that was great timing because I don't know if you remember back in 2006, but in 2006, blogging, podcasting, Web2, wikis, all of that stuff was really that was when it gained enormous momentum. I mean, all of those things.
Absolutely.
But 2005, 2006, Web2 hit its stride and hit the public consciousness. And so I think it was amazing for me to be living in North America and being in that time zone when all of that stuff was happening. Because I think had I lived in Australia and I was 10 hours away from that time zone or whatever the time difference is, I wouldn't have been immersed in the same conversations, the same feeds. I wouldn't have been exposed to the same people. So I look now at some of them, the people who really shaped the technology revolution in education from that era.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say I know most of those people, and I think I only know them because I was living in their time zone for 12 months, and so I got active when they were active. Yeah. Yeah. So that was really important. I mean, when I came back to Australia, I rarely slept because I would basically sit up at night getting involved in chats and conversations and live streams and all sorts of things because that was the US time zone. So I was sitting up until 3 o'clock in the morning so I could be involved in those conversations in that time zone.
Actually, it works amazingly well for us, considering my location and yours.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So how did you get into the Google sphere? You are heavily there, huh?
I guess I am. Yeah, I guess I am. So how did I get into the Google sphere? I think Google's a cool company. I think they do amazing things. I've always admired what Google is about in terms of their, I think, like I said to you before, I was just in love with ideas, and I think Google is a company that is in love with ideas. And Google will do things simply because they're interesting. And for all the mistrust, and the stuff that people throw at Google sometimes, and I know especially in Europe, they cop a lot of, mistrust or whatever over there, and other places in the world. But I've just always looked at what Google done, and I go, I can't think of a company that I would rather trust my stuff to.
Yeah.
Because I just believe that Google does things for all the right reasons, and I don't think Google, despite the fact that they do make a lot of money.
Yeah, they do.
But I think that's a byproduct of just doing the things that they find interesting.
Talking about this,
I think the money is a side product, not a primary goal.
Yeah, talking about this trust thing. So, oops, a bit of echo on my side, but I don't know if you are bothered by that. Anyway, so what you said about Europe. So I think the main thing is that like whatever information, say, the U.S. government wants to get, they do get from anyone, any company in the U.S., I believe, in a way that's not transparent one little bit, and there's nothing anyone can do about that. Not Google, not anyone. And I think that it's not about the trust issue, not trusting Google, for example. It's the fact that you really don't know what happens in the U.S. with your data, and I think that's the problem.
I think we're seeing that now in this. What's happening now with the CIA, FBI, and the the phone that was used in the San Bernardino shooting.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing that play out now, and I admire Apple for taking a stand and saying no, because they could have even
good for their business as well, I believe, though.
Yeah. I think Apple could have come up with a technological solution that would have kept everyone happy, but they've decided then they don't even want to play that game, and they're just saying,
Isn't it? Oh man, isn't it a little bit like this as well? Apple says that we respect your data. We don't need your data, like for example, Google does. We respect your privacy, and this phone thing, it fits pretty well. Considering that, I mean, just
there's lots of back and forths on that debate.
Sure.
I think the fact that when it was clear that China wasn't necessarily playing nice on the internet, Google basically said, well, that's it. We don't want to play with China, so we're pulling out. So I think there's been some really ethical decisions. I mean, I look at other companies that have decided not to pull out of China, despite rumours of all sorts of demands from the Chinese government. That's fine. People can make their own decisions about things,
Sure.
but I just think that when I look at all the companies that I could possibly entrust my data to, I think Google is pretty high on the list.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
there's that. So anyway, I like Google as a company, and so when they started doing this Google Certified Teacher Program, I just thought that sounded like an interesting thing, so I applied for that and got accepted into it. Once you get involved in that environment of people, and you realise, gosh, there's a whole lot of really talented, excited, passionate educators that are all drawn to sort of stuff going on in Google.
Mm.
And I like Google and all that sort of stuff, but that's not what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is the types of people that are being drawn to that environment right now.
Yeah, right.
Because I do think that some of the people that I'm dealing with now in the sort of the Google universe, as you said, are some of the most talented and forward-thinking educators that I've come across. Mm. And so that's why I like hanging out with the Google folk.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I have the same impression. Really.
Yeah.
Cool.
So just to come full circle back around to your original question about getting involved in podcasting and stuff. So
yeah.
I started across this podcast called the Google Educast,
mm-hmm.
which was running on the EdReach network, and I liked the idea of it. It was a bunch of guys and girls that would sit around once a week and talk Google stuff, and I thought, well, I'm interested in Google stuff, and I've done podcasting, and I reckon I could be part of that. And so I actually wrote to them and said, hey, can I be part of your podcast? And they said, sure.
Cool.
So,
very cool.
So there's a lesson in, ask for stuff,
Say again?
They say you don't get anything you ask for, but, you get you won't get anything you don't ask for.
Right.
You won't get everything you do ask for, but you definitely won't get stuff you don't ask for. So, if you ever want something, just ask.
Mm-hmm.
I just asked if I could be part of the podcast, and they said yes, and really enjoyed it.
One thing
those guys that I do that with some of my best mates.
There's especially one thing that I like a lot about Google Educast, and that's the fact that you guys are like from all over the globe. It's really cool, and it's just like a conversation, like any conversation, even though like the participants happen to be located thousands and thousands of miles from each other. It really doesn't matter. It's so cool. Like this meeting of ours here, it doesn't matter either, actually. That's pretty amazing stuff. Pretty amazing stuff.
It was funny when I joined the team because I was the first non-US person to be involved.
Okay, I see.
And so I was constantly the one whenever they go, oh, welcome to the show. Today's the the 15th of March, and I'd go 16th, and I always have to correct it. Just remember, guys, there's a whole other world out there that's not in your time zone.
I must see if I can just get the Google Educast page in here. Screen sharing. I've done so little screen sharing, so I always mess things up. But I guess it's out there now.
Yeah, that's working
in the feed. Yeah, I've been listening to your stuff like I don't know. I think a couple of years now. Lots of fun, and you really keep up to date about all the latest stuff as to using the Google service in education. So it's really cool, since not least since I am a Google Apps for Education super admin as well. So it's really neat.
It's kind of funny whenever I go and do workshops and things for people that they always go, "How do you keep up with this stuff?"
Yeah, right.
Like, I don't know. We just try to do.
People tell it to me, and my mates tell it to me. Yeah, it's
pretty much. Yeah.
So, still about podcasting. What do you think about podcasting in the educational context? I'm really jazzed about that. I think it can be huge. It should be huge.
I have a friend from New Zealand, Jane Nichols, and Jane did a I forget what it was called now, but Jane did a research project into podcasting for kids, and she looked at it wasn't a master's degree or a doctorate or anything, but it was quite an extensive research project. And she eventually came to the conclusion of that podcasting was an incredibly powerful tool to do in education, primarily because kids self-correct. So if you ask a student to write something, they will usually begrudgingly write it, and if there's corrections and feedback to be made, you can say, look, this paragraph here needs to be different, or this sentence doesn't flow on very well. You can tell students all of those sorts of things as a teacher, and half of the times they roll their eyes and go, oh, all right, I'll fix it, like they don't. It's a nuisance. But if you give a kid a microphone and some software for podcasting, and they take that same broken sentence and read it and then listen to it back, you don't need to give them feedback that was a bad sentence. They listen to it themselves and go, I'm going to do that again. That was crap. They'll do it again, not because they're told to, but because they want to. And the self-correction cycle of podcasting, or just getting kids to record things, is very powerful.
Of course, making someone record things and having a podcast might be considered two different things. Huh? I guess.
Yeah. And you do learn to change and improve stuff. I remember the first few episodes of Virtual Staff Room I did. When I came to edit them, I went, I can't believe how often I say and I remember the first 4 or 5 episodes I would spend in post-production, like getting it ready to go to air, or to release the recording. I would go through with Audacity, and I would go through and remove all the ums because I was so embarrassed by them.
That takes ages.
It does take ages, and eventually you go, if I could just learn to stop saying so much, I would have less post-production work to do. And so you actually get better at speaking because it makes your life easier.
Yeah, it's really tough, at least for me, still really tough listening to yourself. And man, I don't ever have time for any post. That's the God's honest truth, It's what it is, and nothing to do about it except try to do better next time.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So
exactly. Look, I don't promise to be the world's best public speaker, or I don't tell funny jokes, and I don't claim to be a great speaker or anything like that. But I think I'm passionate about what I believe in, and I think I think people can tell that.
I think so.
And if I have a positive quality, I think it's that I think I'm being genuine. I think I'm being passionate, and I think that comes through. And if people like it, great. They don't. They don't.
Yeah, just listening to you guys talking about Google Educast, it does come through for sure.
Oh, good.
It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat.
And the other thing that people have said comes through on that show is people have said, you and Fred and Sean and Juan and Nicole and all these people, it sounds like you guys really like each other.
Isn't that strange?
Like, we kind of do,
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason we get on so well is because we actually get on so well.
Yeah. Right. Oh boy. And now, of course, Google is getting back into podcasting, huh?
I hear that. Yeah, I know. I honestly don't know.
I think that is super interesting. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Because the way things have been for many years, there's been the iTunes catalog, and if you want anyone to find your podcast, you better be there. But that's about it. Of course, I'm simplifying things quite a bit here, but now, after many years, Google is getting back actually into podcasting, and that might become a real game changer for podcasting as a whole, I believe. Especially if they'll see to it that anyone can find podcasts easily, just through web search, which perhaps isn't a crazy thought, since Google is pretty good at search. So I have high hopes.
I don't know what the plans are for there. I've heard rumors that Google are going to do a podcast kind of directory and put a podcast like put podcast into Google Play Music and all sorts of things like
Yeah,
that.
I mean that's already happening, I think, in the U.S. Or at least you can
Yeah,
submit your podcast if you are in the U.S. or if you have VPN to U.S. Um,
yeah,
and it will not be. My understanding is that it will not be just a catalog. They will actually be streaming from their servers.
yeah. That'd
But
be
but
great. I
in
would really
order
like
to
that.
yeah, in order to submit your podcast, you need, among other things, a valid RSS feed. So you can't just upload your stuff and go. You can't just upload your stuff to Google servers and go. You do need to have a RSS feed.
Yeah.
But
Well,
then they
when I started
do.
doing this in 2006, I was I was paying for server space because I was running a blog at the time on a WordPress blog on hosted server space,
Yeah.
and so I was just uploading episodes to that hosted space, and then basically manually writing the RSS feeds. Um, so I was actually using a piece of software called Podcast Maker, which would generate the RSS feeds. But then I would have to take those feeds and manually put them on the server and create all the links and everything else. So it was actually quite an onerous process. With the Educast now, we just record the shows on Google Hangouts, and then afterwards I just use, I mean, if you just go to Google and type in YouTube to MP3, you'll find all these programs that will simply convert the YouTube audio to an MP3 file, so that's all we do.
Absolutely. That's what I'm doing as well. Even though I
Yeah.
download the whole MP4, the whole YouTube video, and code it locally.
Right.
I was trying one of those services as well online. It's just like I don't I don't trust them that much. So I like to do that coding of the audio myself. And it's really easy. I mean, I know nothing about that stuff actually, but the only thing you
Yeah.
need to do is to download the video, uh, get it into your whatever Audacity or something, and hit the export button, and there you go.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. Oh,
pretty
look,
pretty
I did
cool
all.
workflow. It's really neat workflow, and this combination using Hangouts on air and podcasting, that is really powerful the way I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we started the Google Educast before Hangouts was a thing,
Mm.
and we were basically recording our video and then post-producing it, and it was pretty onerous. So we were so excited when Hangouts actually came out,
Hmm.
and especially Hangouts on air.
Absolutely.
It
That's
just
the killer. That's the killer for
yeah.
sure. I'm just a little bit worried what's going on with Hangouts, and I mean, like Hangouts, generally speaking, is a bit of a mess somehow. That's at least the way I see it. But Hangouts on air, I mean, it works perfectly. I have actually
Yeah.
never. I've been, I guess, doing this stuff for some 3 years or whatever, and not once uh, has have things been messed up actually on the Google side.
Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing. Um, but what's happening now, since they are kind of ripping the good stuff out of Google Plus and all that, and I just hope that they do something
Yeah.
really good out of
I think
Hangouts on Air as
I
well.
think not so much they're ripping the stuff out of it as they're disassembling it and they're just breaking it
Yeah,
into bits.
yeah,
And
okay.
look, when I think about it, I think Photos does make more sense as a standalone service.
I think so too.
I definitely think Hangouts makes more sense as a standalone service, or at least Hangouts on air.
Yeah, but Hangouts on
Um,
Air needs some kind of a landing page. I like the event thing. I guess the event
yeah,
thing will be going away. I don't know.
yeah. They took events away from Plus, and that doesn't make any sense to
But I
me.
think you can still create events at Hangouts.google.com for Hangouts on Air if you like. I think so. But it's
Yeah,
a little bit more, I don't know. I got so used to that, like creating the event on the Google Plus side, and then you have your Hangout planned and you got it in your calendar and everything. It's beautiful workflow actually. So I hope that
yeah,
there will be something similar in the future. Hope that.
yeah. I'd like to see that. Yeah, I think it'd be great. I love the idea that Google are talking about actually hosting the files rather than just creating a
Yeah,
catalog.
you mean the podcasting thing?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because I mean, right now we're taking our MP3 files and uploading them to SoundCloud, and we're hosting everything from SoundCloud. And SoundCloud has a fantastic podcasting service where they'll generate all the RSS feed. But it's like $15 a month, which is not much, but it's it adds up. And we don't have a revenue model for our podcast. We just basically do it because we like doing it.
Right.
It would be nice to attract some sponsorship or whatever, but and it's not a lot of money. But it'd be nice to do that. But I mean, if Google comes along and does that, to be honest, I'd rather give my money to Google than to SoundCloud. Although I like SoundCloud.
Yeah, and you never know how long SoundCloud will be around. They are bleeding money heavily, as far as I know.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. But I think this Google podcast initiative, it'll be rolling worldwide soon, I think. And I soon meaning like my guess is it'll be months more than years, definitely. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Yeah. By the way, I guess we must be wrapping up soon as well. We've been going on for 1 hour, and I guess that's what I said. I'd be stealing 1 hour from you, and not much more, hopefully. You got other things to do, perhaps, as well. But let's see. You are moving on, aren't you? From your from one way of working in education to another right now. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so I finished up. I was at Presbyterian Ladies College in Sydney. So it's an independent school there. I was there for 8 years, which I loved. It was lots of great things happening there, lots of opportunity, lots of amazing. It's a fantastic school. Lots of cool things happening. But I just felt like I got to a point where
is this it, by the way? Where you work?
Is what's that?
PLC.
PLC, yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a great school. My daughter went there, so I have good things to say about the school. But I just got to the point where I just felt like I'm working with the same 30 or 40 people every day.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I've done as much as I can do there. And the opportunity came up to do some work with EdTech team, who have been running the Google Summit program around the world, and we do a whole lot of custom PD with schools and working with teachers and working with kids. There's some amazing initiatives going on inside EdTech team at the moment, with things like Breakout EDU and all sorts of cool stuff. And so I got it was suggested to me that if I wanted it, there'd be a full-time position with EdTech team, and I thought, well, I can keep going working with the same 30 or 40 people every day, or I can go and work with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teachers every year and have some real impact.
Yeah.
And so ultimately that's what I decided to do.
Okay. Is this it?
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so EdTech team is based in California, but and I've been doing some stuff with EdTech team for a couple of years. So I know they're a great bunch of people. I think, like I said about Google, I just think EdTech team are doing really interesting things with great people who are passionate about what they do. And I can't think of a better environment to try and put yourself in than, surrounding yourself with excited, passionate, intelligent, clever people who want to change the world.
Yeah, sounds pretty neat to me.
Yeah. So I jumped ship, and I'm doing this full time now, and it's fantastic. And we've got so much to do, so much work to do, so many teachers to work with, so many kids to work with, and so much to change in education. And I think we have a real shot at making a difference.
Very cool for sure. Hope you'll keep at it with the Google Educast as well, by the way.
Well, we plan to, yeah. It's been crazy lately. We record for my time zone. It's like Wednesday morning for me, and just the last few weeks I've just been in the middle of workshops and things every Wednesday. So I've been a bit slack joining but I recorded one last week without me, which is great.
Yeah. I guess we might show your own blog as well. Where do people find you? What's the easiest way to find you on the net? Is it your blog or something?
Yeah, look, one of the things that's nice about having an unusual name like mine is you can pretty much Google me and find me.
I got the same thing going.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So if you just Google Chris Betcher, you'll probably find me as one of the top hits.
Yeah,
In
right.
fact, I think if you Google Chris Betcher, probably the first 10 pages are pretty much all me. So I'm pretty easy to find online. But yeah, chrisbetcher.com is my blog.
All right. Very cool. Um, Thanks a lot for joining me here
No, thank you for
online
having me.
on air. It's been a pleasure, really. You being into tons of interesting stuff, and it seems you will continue that way, from what I hear.
Thanks,
So
Niilo. Much
yeah, hope to hear from you later on as well. By the way, and if you got some cool ideas or whatever, need something specific from the North Pole, you never know. So just holler.
I can always ask for special favors from the North Pole.
Yeah, right. Great. Thanks a lot, and take good care.
No worries. Good to chat with you. Thanks,
Good
mate.
to chat with you. Bye.
Bye.